so it is with the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
In your heart, you know he's right.
I hear there's rumors on the internets.
Well, good morning, Wilmington, North Carolina. Welcome to Big Talker Mornings here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. It's going to be a beautiful day out there. We're looking at a nice little high of around 73 degrees, plenty of sun, plenty of fun, and much more to happen. This is not the Joe Catanacci Show, as you guys heard last week. Joe Catanacci, who normally hosts our morning program here at the Big Talker, has moved on to WRRN in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Obviously, Joe, still a friend of the station, doing a great job down there. And I will be your host for today and tomorrow. My name is Yaël Ossowski. I've been on the air a little bit here at the Big Talker, probably the last 5 years or so. And you probably heard me go back and forth with Joe, a little bit with Chad Adams, and been able to guest host a couple of times. You might have heard me on the Friday show with Joe, but this is Big Talker Mornings, rebranded, brand new, shipped, shape, and ready to tussle. So there's a lot of stuff that's been happening here. Again, we wish all the best to Joe. He's actually competing with this with this little time slot that we have here now down there in Myrtle Beach. I believe he did start there, so we wish him all of the best and definitely hope that we can have some great success between our two stations and areas. So again, my name is Yaël Ossowski. If you are just tuning in, normally you'll kind of hear me throughout the week or with Consumer Choice Radio, which broadcasts Saturdays at 10. But I'm here on the morning show for today and Tuesday. And then Chad Adams, one of the owners of Big Talker, will be on for the rest of the week. We've got some great guests. We've got some great topics. We're going to get into the local elections first. I think that's an important thing here for everyone in the city of Wilmington, Brunswick County, New Hanover County. A lot of important questions that are going to be asked here in the next couple of days. And I think this is one of the great things that local radio really can target better than any other medium. We have local elections that are happening. These are not in the normal cycle of the federal election, of your Congress, of the president, of the governor, and that means that actually people are paying attention who look at local issues, and specifically the elections that we're talking about are the municipal ones. We have our mayoral elections that's happening in Wilmington, but also pretty much every single larger town out there in Brunswick County, Oak Island, Southport, and the rest. We've got our city council as well. And related to that, we will have on the show later Jonathan Uscaguetti. He is a candidate for the Wilmington City Council. He's been a little bit on the station before, but since we've got just 24 hours to go before Election Day here in Wilmington, North Carolina, we figured it'd be a great opportunity to have him on, discuss his ideas and what he'd like to bring to the City Council. There's plenty more there. If you guys are listening on the radio, you should know that we are streaming as well every single morning to our YouTube page. Head on over to the YouTube. Just Google Big Talker. We'll be there. And also on the Facebook page. And if you have not already, the local app, you can find that in the App Store. Whether you're on Android or iPhone, you should be able to listen in all day, hear the great music, hear the great talk, hear the great interviews, debates, and commentary all day long here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. So let's talk a little bit about the local elections here. I know we've discussed it in the past couple of weeks here on the program. There's been some candidates who've come on. We've had some debate about it. Probably looking at this mayoral election is one of the more interesting ones. If we look at Mayor Bill Saffo, one of the longest-serving mayors here in North Carolina, and, you know, unlike a lot of the big city elections that some of y'all might have heard about, that would take place in Philadelphia, New York. This is not necessarily the most partisan of elections. They're not necessarily running under all of their banners. And, there are some differences between the two candidates. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how it plays out for the next few days. I think Bill Saffo, as a mayor, many of you have had some heated opinions. I've heard you calling into the show and having plenty of debate about how the mayor's been doing in some of his comments. I think that's pretty important, at least for Wilmington and what's going to happen here. The other candidate is Harper Peterson. Harper Peterson is no stranger at all to politics and has made plenty of promises related to climate, equity, growth, and transparency. Again, it's very interesting to see how all this stuff informs the local elections as well. So you guys can go out and vote. Tomorrow will be election day. You might have already sent in your ballot beforehand, but you can head on over to the website. Just go to the Googles and check out the Wilmington city elections. And then we also have our city council elections. And as I mentioned, we're going to have Jonathan Uscaguetti on a little bit later. We'll be able to discuss the issues that are pertinent in that race and how your voice could actually matter. Looking at across the state, there's going to be probably more to come here. We've learned a little bit more about what's happening with our Senator Richard Burr. If you guys remember Richard Burr, who is one of our 2 senators here in the state of North Carolina, well, he made a little bit of an uh-oh, didn't he? This is in the beginning of the pandemic, COVID-19. He was part of some very, we'll say, discreet hearings in which he was getting classified information about how impactful COVID was going to be, what it would mean for companies, for businesses, for the supply chain. And he made a call over to his brother-in-law and basically was trading stocks, making sure to sell, that he could sell $1.6 million in stocks. This is back in February 2020, folks. So we didn't really know as much about how this is all going to shake out. We only had seen what had been happening in China, in our good old Chinese Communist Party-ruled state over there. But we did know that some people in Washington, D.C. were starting to take it seriously. And Burr, because he basically, according to these new regulations, did have to disclose it. He dumped $1.6 million in stocks, many of them related to the hospitality industry, which anyone could have guessed would have taken a hit after all the businesses were forced to be closed. And it looks like he did really well. But there are plenty of his other former colleagues, current colleagues up there in D.C. They actually have started the Richard Burr Legal Expense Trust Fund. And that thing is doing pretty well. They've hired a couple of lawyers, around $500,000 each to defend the senior senator. So we're going to see how this all shakes out. But look, this isn't about party, folks. It has nothing to do with party. It has everything to do with the conduct of the state's people that we are to elect from our state of North Carolina to represent us. When they go up there, they get all types of classified information. The entire hope is that they go up there and with the information that they have, with the power that they're able to have, with the votes, with any of the committee positions, they're going to do it to further the interests of North Carolinians. They're going to do that from the first day until the last day. And what we've seen from Senator Richard Burr, that's a whole other thing. It's a whole other thing. So there's going to be plenty more on that, a lot more reporting. I mean, he is not up for re-election, so the voters necessarily won't have our say, but still, to say that that is the conduct of a senator from our state of North Carolina, from the Tar Heel State, yeah, that was pretty disappointing. And I know that there's an editorial over there at the Charlotte Observer that kind of call him out, no surprise. But, we'll see if that standard holds up. I mean, if any of you are very active on Twitter on the political side, there's all types of memes related to many lawmakers who have very, very big and apparently very smart portfolios when it comes to investing. Now, one of my favorite ones is the Nancy Pelosi portfolio tracker, which actually has been dinged by Twitter a couple of times, but essentially just is tracking Nancy Pelosi's many investments that we know about, where she has gained a good amount of money. And obviously, as a huge power broker in Washington, D.C., one could expect you'd get a good amount of information. You'd understand a bit of what's happening behind closed doors. Unfortunate that the same thing happened with our own Senator Richard Burr. We'll see what happens in the next senatorial election here in North Carolina. I know we're going to have interesting debates on that. I know that here on The Big Talker, we've already hosted a number of the candidates, so that we're definitely going to have a better idea of what this will be. It's probably going to be one of the most expensive races that we've ever seen, but that means that you, as a voter, are going to have huge impact. So that's a great thing to know that's going to happen for North Carolinians. You guys have the right to vote and to change things, and that's what's going to happen with our local elections here in Wilmington and Brunswick County and New Hanover County. You guys head out to the polls for tomorrow, or maybe you already submitted your ballot. Interesting race, and it all comes down to an end by tomorrow evening. So again, this is Yaël Ossowski hosting the Big Talker Mornings. This is our daily program from 7 to 10 a.m. We're streaming on all the nets. We're streaming on all the channels. We got plenty more to come, great interviews and analysis. Let's talk about what's happening local. Let's talk about what's happening at the state, national level, and around the world. There's plenty of stuff that I know you guys can get excited about. So stay tuned to that dial, 106.7 FM, The Big Talker. We'll be right back after these messages. Yaël Ossowski here at the microphone today and tomorrow. And we'll be back after this.
PPD Development LP seeks a senior programmer analyst 2 bioinformatics in Wilmington, North Carolina, to perform advanced bioinformatics programming activities for the statistical and computational consideration of research projects. Master of Science in 4 years or Bachelor of Science in 6 years. Duties may be performed remotely. For full requirements and to apply, send resume to global.recruitmentsSM@ppdi.com. Job reference number 203780.
This is Chad Adams, president of Red Wolf Broadcasting, proud to announce our fall lineup starting October of 2021. From 7 to 10 a.m., we have Joe Catanacci covering all of the local issues of the day and looking at some of the national things that are happening. Then Mike Gallagher, one of America's longest-running talk show hosts, from 10 to noon. From noon to 3 p.m., we have the up-and-coming Clay Travis and Buck Sexton. You're going to love that show. And then one of the toughest hosts in America, Dana Lash, from 3 to 6 p.m. So join us each and every day, Monday through Friday, here on the Big Talker FM.
Leland needs new, fresh leadership. We need Jason Gaver, a husband, father, veteran, and small business owner, a proven leader who is engaged in our community. Jason's only agenda is to shape a positive future for the town where his daughter will grow up. He has a servant's heart and the strength to be an independent voice. Jason Gaver is the new leader we need. Visit jasongaver.com to learn more. Paid for by the Committee to Elect Jason Gaver.
Well, hey, y'all, it's Holly Brewer
and Amy Ludwig
and Kristen Ludwig
from Just Think, the podcast where we don't want to tell you what to think. We just challenge you to do it. We're happy to have some of our episodes featured right here on 106.7 The Big Talker on Saturdays at 11 a.m. So we hope you join us in the conversation and, most importantly, just think.
And welcome back to Big Talker Mornings, broadcasting here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. I am your host today, Yaël Ossowski. I'll be coming to you today and tomorrow, and then we'll have Chad Adams on the microphone for the rest of the week. Great to have you guys here. We covered a couple of things in local news, particularly the municipal elections that are happening tomorrow throughout the area, not just in the city of Wilmington, but also over there in Brunswick County, throughout New Hanover County. So we're going to have a good slate of elections. We've got a big, very contentious mayoral run. We've got some city council elections that have really made the headlines, and we will have at least one of the candidates that will be coming on here in a bit, probably in hour number 2 to talk to us about the issues and what is happening there. All kinds of local stuff that I know you guys are very concerned about when it comes to police, when it comes to safety, when it comes to education, when it comes to transparency, housing. There's a lot of different questions that have been put to some of the candidates and what they're actually going to do. So we're really going to look forward to those interviews that are coming up, but also to see the results of the election and how things could change in the beautiful Wilmington area. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Yaël Ossowski here at the mic. There's a few other things that have been happening over the weekend. Let's stay topical here with kind of local sports. Not sure if you guys watched the NASCAR race. For those NASCAR fans, shout out to you. But man, that was a big one. We're down to the wire when it comes to Cup Series racing, almost to the championship race that's going to happen over there in Miami. We have the Alex Bowman actually came out with the win and did so after putting the driver of the 11 FedEx car, Denny Hamlin, in the wall. That was a pretty contentious thing. And then obviously they tussled a bit after the flag was dropped, and Denny Hamlin went to interrupt the celebration of Alex Bowman where they do the burnouts and did his own little burnout. You don't see that every day. So those of you who are interested, a lot of stuff is coming down. We do have our Final Four. We have Denny Hamlin, we have Martin Truex Jr., we have Chase Elliott, and we have Kyle Larson. This is going to be the Final Four for the NASCAR Cup Series all the way down to Miami. It all comes down to this. If you've followed NASCAR throughout the years, I got to say it was around 15 years ago, they changed the scoring mechanism to do this kind of playoff model, very similar to NFL or NBA or any of these other sports. Has it been a success? I don't know. Probably not. It's been somewhat interesting. Has it kept up with making people more attracted to watching it on television? Yeah, maybe. It's very tough to know. I mean, the South, particularly the Southeast, is a huge market for NASCAR and all the different races, and I know that a lot of people are very interested in that, but if there's a lot of people who've moved to Wilmington who are listening to this and have come from the North, they're probably not as interested. But regardless, we do have a great, great season so far that we've seen from the Carolina Hurricanes. In hockey, I believe they're still undefeated. We still have the Panthers out there. I haven't even looked at how the Panthers are doing. Should we look that up, everybody? Let's see how the Carolina Panthers have been doing. We had, I know we had a game yesterday. Let's see here. So we had the game, let's see, last one, Panthers. Looks like they lost to the Giants 25-3. That was October 24. So yesterday, with the Falcons. Okay, so 19-13, and they were victorious. So there we go. We got the Carolina Panthers that actually did do well across with Atlanta. Usually that's one of the best games in the NFC when you have the Panthers versus the Falcons. Hasn't been as competitive in the recent years, but this one was at Atlanta, and the Panthers did prevail. So good for them. I'm not the biggest sports guy, that you tune into the Big Talker to hear some talk and commentary and politics and what's happening in the local area. Not necessarily sports. You'll get that in the bottom of the hour news breaks and updates. But just wanted to throw that across the transom because why not? We are on radio. Let's talk about what good old President Joe Biden was up to over the weekend. So he's over there in Europe, and he's meeting with many of the other leaders of the so-called G7. The G7 is the largest proportion of the richest 7 economies. So it's the leaders of each of those 7 economies, Russia not included, but the G7 meets every few months, and they'll come together for policies, for strategy, and you know that they're discussing Build Back Better that you guys have definitely heard about, and this is all coinciding with the future COP that's going to deal with climate change in Glasgow, Scotland. So we know that that's going to be a big deal for what's happening though with the G7, G20, all these different countries. Apparently there was a deal that was struck on taxation, and particularly on minimum corporate taxation. The idea that there will be a floor to how much companies are going to be charged for taxation, and it doesn't matter which country you're in. So the idea is that you can't have a country like Ireland with 0% corporate tax rates, or you can't have the United States with, a very, very high 28%. Oh boy. So they want to make sure that there's a floor of 15% so that companies don't pick up and leave and go to the other areas that have better tax jurisdictions. But that's not the kind of stuff that I think is really animating people. This is probably going to be harmful in some way. We're definitely going to see some people try to figure out how to game the system, and believe you me, my friends, it's very easy for many companies with many lawyers and plenty of budgets to figure out how to game the system and work it out. I only see this as a kind of way to really make everybody poorer overall. If we really think about it, if we increase taxes on all of the companies, it's not as if the companies are all sitting awash and all of the money in the world. Much of it is going to come down to us as consumers in the form of higher prices. So essentially, we're all getting taxed a certain amount. Not going to be the best thing. But I don't even think that's the most important thing that's going to come from what's happening throughout the week with the G20 and with the UN summit on climate, the climate change summit. I think there's going to be a lot more that's going to come out. We've heard some very big words from Biden, from the president of the European Commission. We've heard big talk as well from Boris Johnson, who's Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And this stuff is important. And I say it's important because it's not as if the rules will change tomorrow with the snap of the fingers, but it does mean that it will set the precedent for what the debates will be on climate change and what the policies will be economically. And for many areas, particularly in North Carolina, to know that there are going to be some kind of climate change restrictions, that there's going to be some kind of increased taxation, if we're looking at emitters, if we're looking at labeling various people polluters, it's going to have a big impact. It could be on the agricultural sort of industry that's out east. It could be with many of the more industrial parts that are up in the Research Triangle. There could be a lot of impact here. Now, we haven't heard anything about any minimum taxes or what the politicians are supposed to do, but these are politicians that are meeting in a room. They're not necessarily going to be able to change the entire scope of climate change throughout the world. Really, the only tools available at governments, what are they really going to be able to do? The big thing that we've heard from particularly Scotland and what's happening throughout the week is they want to put a lot of money, a lot of investments in emerging technologies. They want to be able to fund the new innovative technologies that will bring us away from climate change. And that, I think, is a great idea, but it doesn't have to be governments. And in fact, as we remember from President Obama's tenure with Solana, when the government does do it, it tends to be inefficient, it tends to be corrupt, and it tends to not work. So is that something that they're going to keep in mind? That I don't know. We saw that the agreement that they reached on Sunday was the idea that they're going to halt the public financing of all coal-fired power plants by the end of the year. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it will be done right away, and this is kind of an agreement, and it's going to be up to all these different areas. I think if that's all that they agreed to, overall, that's not really going to be too impactful. And I think that's actually a good thing, because if we understand well what's happening with economics, if we understand well what's happening with innovation, if we do have climate change, if we do want to be able to mitigate it, we're going to need technological innovation. And that's going to come about from incentives that are in place in the market to provide that to entrepreneurs, to consumers, to business people, and the like. When we talk about what's happening with Elon Musk and electric vehicles, and we'll talk about that later in the show, when we talk about what he's been able to do, just the sheer amount of entrepreneurial force, and that has had a cultural shift. And that hasn't been because of any government edict or law or requirement or any agreement based with the G7 or G20. And I think that's what's important to note here, is that the space that's needed for free enterprise and for private enterprise, it's definitely not talked about. I mean, there's no G20 chair, and then you got a couple of companies or you have some entrepreneurs with some great ideas. It's mostly governments, it's mostly elected leaders. They're just trying to bring something back to their populations. And, they have to be careful as well, because as we remember, If you guys remember the Yellow Vest movement that was out there in France, that was people who were upset at the carbon taxes and all of the different Paris Climate Accord resolutions that came into force in France, and it hiked up the gas prices. And that left a lot of drivers, left a lot of truckers having to pay a lot more and earning a lot less. So far, that seems to be the only antidote for many of these organizations, institutions, and meetings is more taxes, more of the money. It has more to do with money. It's never with actual solutions. It's not about talking about what is the great technology that will deliver us from this. I hope it will be. I hope we'll have that change in due time. I think it will come very soon. So we got much more to come here on Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski. We'll be right back. We've got some interviews coming up, folks, so we're not leaving you out there. Stay tuned to that dial, and we'll be right back after this.
Termites, mosquitoes, roaches, spiders. The list of insects and pests goes on and on. So how do you keep them all at bay and out of your home? Call the professionals at Bugno Pest Control. That's Mr. Bugno to you, pal. Bugno Pest Control can not only eliminate insects and pests from in and around your home, they also guarantee it. They are fully licensed and insured, family owned and operated for all your pest control needs. Call Bugno Pest Control, 910-367-2501, or visit bugnopestcontrol.com. Rated 5 stars on Angie's List and HomeAdvisor.com.
As Wilmington's leader in restorative and regenerative medicine, the Frank Institute specializes in health optimization. Simply put, we use in-depth evaluations and lab testing to determine the best treatments for each patient. So whether you're suffering from an unseen hormonal imbalance or a simple vitamin deficiency, the Frank Institute is ready to get you back to better living. Call us at 910-679-8534 or fill out our symptom survey online at frankinstitute.com. Because at the Frank Institute, you live, we help.
Hey, this is Charlie Miller, your state representative in the North Carolina House. Just wanted to say thank you for listening. If you get a chance to go on Facebook and search Representative Charlie Miller to receive my exclusive legislative updates to keep you up to date with all of what's happening in Raleigh. You can also sign up for my newsletter to have a direct line of information straight from the Capitol. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Paid for by the committee to elect Charlie Miller for NC House.
When your AC stops, don't despair, just go.
Go where? The South Pole?
Go Southern Comfort Heating and Air. For preventive maintenance, service, and repair, go there.
Where?
Southern Comfort Heating and Air.
Are they fair?
Fair and square. Low prices, speedy service, and technicians who care. When your AC stops, don't stare, go there.
Is there a website you can share?
Go southerncomfort.com. If you go anywhere else, beware.
I swear.
Call 910-524-7609.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Big Talker Mornings. Yaël Ossowski here on the mic. Told you guys I'd have some interesting interviews lined up and some great content, and definitely looking forward to this one. We're going to be speaking with former South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford. This interview was conducted by my partner in crime, my radio co-host on the weekend program Consumer Choice Radio, David Clement. This is an interview with Mark Sanford. He's in book promo time. Mark Sanford, if you guys do not remember, was not only the governor of South Carolina, but also an elected representative down there. And he's been doing a lot of great stuff since he's left office, particularly related to the debt and deficits, but also to the future of the Republican Party, of conservatism, and what he calls a second chance for the party, the movement, the nation, and ourselves. So go ahead and roll that tape. Interview David Clement, my colleague, with former South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us on the program.
Great to do so. Thanks for letting me join you this morning.
Perfect. So you've been busy. You have recently published a book, Two Roads Diverged, A Second Chance for the Republican Party, the Conservative Movement, the Nation, and Ourselves. And I have to admit to our listeners, I have not read the book yet, but it is expected to be delivered in the next day or two, so I'm excited to dig into that. But just explain to our listeners why you wanted to write a book and maybe some of the core themes that you touch on.
Well, I mean, in simplest form, you don't invest a long number of years of your life in politics if you don't care. And I care deeply. And though I'm out of politics, I think I still have something to say. And I think what I have to say is the same thing that you and a lot of other concerned Americans have to say, which is we're at a tipping point. We're at a crossroads. And if we don't get this right, we're in big trouble, period. And that has real implications for my sons and a lot of other young folks out there. And so, there are two things that'll kill off a civilization. One is spending gone awry, and you can see this in a lot of different countries over the years where they basically get to a crossroads, and do they stay where they are, which is unsustainable, or do they not? And if they do, well, unsustainable has a way of coming to an end. So a wreck financially is something to kill off a civilization. The other thing is tribalism. Our founding fathers were very deliberate in setting up a reason-based republic, wherein we'd come together, agree to disagree on occasion, but keep on moving. And we've lost that of late on both the left and the right. There's a lot of, I do it because this is what my tribe says, or this is what my side says, or this is what the guy or gal at the top says. And that's not the American way. So I wrote it because I'm concerned about the direction and future of our country. And I wrote it because I think we're at a tipping point. And I wrote it because I think we're about to have a financial train wreck, and we better watch out for the tribalism at play.
It strikes me as a very nuanced critique of both parties in that sense, which I think kind of highlights your point of moving away from tribalism. And I know that, politics is always in some way a team sport, but that seems to be it seems to be that people are rooting for politicians in the same way that I'm a diehard Toronto Leafs fan, and even when they're terrible, I will say they're the best team in the world. And it just almost like I've separated the rationality from it, which I suppose is probably fine for sports, but can have some serious consequences in terms of the politics of the day.
Big time. And to your point, certainly politics has always had a team element to it, no doubt about it. I've been a part of politics for a long while, but it's at a level I have never seen before. And I think that Tom Rice, who represents the Myrtle Beach area of South Carolina, said it well when, he said, you know what somebody is that voted with Trump 97% of the time? And he paused. He said, an enemy. and it's true. I voted with Trump. If you actually look at my voting record with the administration, 93% of the time, and yet I was viewed as something of an enemy by President Trump, and that's crazy. You don't get all the loaf in life in anything, and if you're 95, 93, 97% of the time, you're not an enemy, you're an ally. And that's the way it is of late on both sides.
I always have that when people ask me, they're like, well, who would you support? Like, who do you agree with 100%? And I'll be like, the only person I agree with 100% is myself. And even that changes because views evolve. And I go back, let's say 5 or 6 years. I'm like, I don't know if I really believe that anymore. I think the world has changed a little bit. So you highlight a very good point there. On the Republican side, because obviously that was where you served both as a governor and as a member of Congress. What do you think is really the path forward? Some commentators, I think it was David French, who would likely fall into a similar realm of politics in terms of you, someone who is certainly a Republican in the broader sense, but was very much despised by Trump and those who adamantly support him. Some have suggested that there needs to be a thought of some sort of new conservative party. Some have said, no, we have to hold on. Where do you see this kind of falling? Is there a future for the conservative movement or the Republicans with the Republican Party as it is now?
Time will tell. We don't know. It depends on how this thing morphs and develops over time. What I know is we can't stay on the road we're on, and either the party's going to come back to that which made it great. I mean, the party's been around for a long time. Both parties have, and I think the view of the left and the right needs to be expressed in the national political body. I mean, both sides, both perspectives make each other stronger and that much more clear about what one believes. But I don't know. I mean, either it's going to continue to go. It's been a bit crazy of late. Continue to go down that route, in which case a new party will form to carry the conservative mantle, or it'll come back to some of what made it great with refinement. Obviously, some things need to change. I mean, too much of the Republican Party has been about protecting big business, and that's not consistent with the conservative theme. And so we will see. It's the answer.
Do you have any input on maybe who some of those shining lights, whether they be in Congress or the Senate, or maybe outside of politics and the conservative movement, may be, who maybe share that perspective that you have with the latter half of trying to tweak and refine the Republican Party, maybe to return to some of its previous successes and accounting for some of its previous errors?
I don't want to name names, because you name one and you leave everybody else out.
That's fair. I kind of put you on the spot there.
But I would say, obviously, there are bright spots scattered around. Not as many as I'd like. The four of us who spoke out early against Trump, not against him, but against some of the crazy that he did on occasion, are all gone. So, Corker and Flake in the Senate, and me and Amash in the House, it sort of involved political extinction. But, I think that the fever is breaking, and the president is no longer the president. He doesn't have quite the, social media bandwidth that he did before. So we will see. But, for a while, it's been everybody just keeping their head down. And I don't think that should be the way that we proceed in politics. I think that the beauty of politics is saying, here's what I believe and why I believe it. And now let's debate it. Not let me keep my head down and stay relevant. With due respect to somebody like, Lindsey Graham, who I started out with in politics, he was against Trump, then now adamantly, wildly for him, and, sort of back and forth. I think that's what turns a lot of people off to politics, of just, swings one side to the other. Just pick a flavor and defend it unless new information comes along that is overwhelming. But until then, don't float with the wind. Pick a point of view and argue it and debate it and stand by it.
Well, that was former South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford speaking to my colleague David Clement. A little portion of our Consumer Choice Radio show. Figured I'd share it here on the Big Talker Morning Show. I'm Yaël Ossowski. Guys, what did you think of that? What do you think about Governor Mark Sanford's message, the way that he views principle, party, and the future of conservative politics? There's definitely a lot of really interesting nuggets in there. I mean, he's not a guy who is, really not accustomed to power. He understands a lot of this. Obviously, he did run for president at the same time that Trump was running for re-election, and did not do very well, if you'll remember. But I think it's great to hear someone like Governor Mark Sanford. I mean, someone with those principles, someone who has been standing up for many of these ideas and principles and discussing them openly and with clarity for many years. He definitely gives us a lot to think about. And I would hope that would inform the future of politics, not just here in the South, in North and South Carolina, but also federally, because I think there's a lot to learn from someone who is principled. And, we don't say it too often, but we don't really have too many statesmen or stateswomen in our politics. Is that right? Someone that you would really consider as above the fray, who isn't just on a particular partisan side and really has generally contributed to the American experiment. Whatever you think of Mark Sanford, I think you could definitely claim that he has done that. So it's great to have him on the program. We have much more to come. Hour 2, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more city politics. talking about the Wilmington City Council race with Jonathan Uscaguetti. We'll be right back after this here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM.
If you're anywhere near Oak Island, come check out Seaside Jewelers at 8801 East Oak Island Drive. They're on Oak Island. You're going to find the latest in Oak Island lighthouses, nautical charms, pendants. You're going to find bracelet, turtle charms, anything in the jewelry genre you need, you can get there. And if they don't have it, they'll find a way to get it for you. Come check out Seaside Jewelers at 8801 East Oak Island Drive. And if you tell them you heard it on the Big Talker FM, an extra 10% off your purchase, but only at Seaside Jewelers, 8801 East Oak Island Drive. The lowest prices in town. Come check us out today.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
I'm State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better state. We are one of the fastest growing and most reviewed insurance agencies in Wilmington. That's because our customers love the personalized attention that we give to you. Let us help you get to a better state by visiting our website at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And welcome back to Big Talker Mornings. Here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM, I'm Yaël Ossowski, your host for today and for tomorrow. If you had previously listened, you guys are missing Joe Catanacci's voice. Well, he's moved on to WRRN down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now you got me. For now, Chad will be on the rest of the week. Chad Adams, owner of the station here at the Big Talker. You guys can follow all of our social media channels. Just typing in Big Talker, you'll be able to find us. All the streams as well. Important to see that info. Important to see all that good stuff. We talked a little bit about what was happening overseas with Biden. We're talking about the city council elections. Last segment, we were able to get an interview with Governor Mark Sanford, former South Carolina governor. I want to talk a little bit about culture. Something that is, we're all a part of it. We all partake and we all share, and particularly with social media nowadays, we're able to share with hundreds of thousands or millions of people at once. Let's just talk about it. Let's go, Brandon. Now, if you're a conservative listening to talk radio, I assume you know exactly what that means. It's a wonderful euphemism. For those of you who don't know, I'll give you a quick background. Those of you who do, I guess you can continue the chants in the background. But let's go, Brandon. This comes from actually a truck series race. So it is NASCAR. Actually, it might have been truck or it might have been the Xfinity race. I'm not 100% sure, but it was one of the local races that was on TV. And they basically interviewed the winner. I forget what his name. His name was Brandon something. I forget what his name was. But the people in the crowd, while the television was filming the sort of victory interview, were yelling F Joe Biden. Now, by F, you can replace that with, the, that you know what it is. But people were chanting that, and the woman who was interviewing the race winner, Brandon, said, "Oh, looks like they're chanting, 'Let's go, Brandon.'" And from that moment on, it became a meme. You've seen it all. You probably even bought a T-shirt, didn't you? Did you buy a T-shirt? Did you have a T-shirt that says "Let's go, Brandon" on it? Either way, it has become somewhat of a very famous little internet slang. It's kind of caught on in many circles. I've seen a lot of upper accounts. Obviously, all the the Trump kids are now using it all over their Twitter accounts, and we've even seen some celebrities using it. And look, this is not a judgment. You can love the president. You can hate the president. That's the greatest part about living in a free country. You can have your own view. And there's a lot of people who hated Trump, and I think we remember that the past 5 years. There's a lot of people who don't like Joe Biden, maybe for different reasons, maybe for the same reasons. It has to do with political tribes. If you guys are part of political tribes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But regardless, this meme has really spread fast. And we saw that the Let's Go Brandon songs were topping the charts of Apple Music, any other, I don't even know if they do Billboard rankings anymore, but I know on Spotify as well, they've gone through the roof. So people are looking this stuff up, people are engaging with it, people are laughing, and they're saying, let's go Brandon. And it's being used kind of everywhere. My question to you all, as the listening audience, is this a sort of pinnacle moment in which conservatives, and generally the more right-wing area of our politics, is becoming better at comedy, at satire, at culture? Is this really the moment where it has arrived, where everyone's going to be speaking in the Let's Go Brandon euphemism? I wonder if that's the case, because I think what happened in the last 5 years with the rise of Trump, and we see it with our comedians. You know, I used to love Stephen Colbert, one of my favorite comedians. I used to watch him all the time. He made fun of Bill O'Reilly on his program on Comedy Central, if you guys remember. On the Colbert Report, it was this great show, good satire, sort of take on the news, fawning that outrage. It was hilarious. And then throughout the Trump era, many of these comedians turned into political pundits, telling you what to think, telling you that Trump was evil and bad and wrong and all the rest. It's similar to the way that Republicans are always criticized. Is they're either evil or they're stupid. Right? It's one or the other. And usually the Democrats are geniuses that are unfortunately held back by modern politics. So for the comedians, I mean, we really did see a breakdown throughout the Trump administration. I think there are many comedians who have done very well, and these are comedians that I think are getting a lot of hits. You know, Dave Chappelle raking in, I don't even know how many millions of people watching his Netflix special. But I don't know if any of these sort of nighttime TV talk show hosts who, principally are comedians, how many of them still have an audience nowadays? Are they still even funny? I mean, Saturday Night Live used to be my favorite program ever. I used to host a website dedicated to SNL. I was all in. I followed all the sketches. I followed all the players, all the comedians who were on there. You follow their careers. Nowadays, there's just nothing funny because they just relate to the Trump meme. And it's actually, we're going to play a clip by Norm Macdonald, the former comedian Norm Macdonald, the late Norm Macdonald. He had a great segment. He was on Canadian television, and he was talking about comedians who do jokes about Trump. Can you get that clip up here, producer? Can you do that?
I try to not do comedy about Donald Trump because I think I had one joke about Donald Trump that I ever did where I said that Americans hated Hillary Clinton so much that they voted for someone they hated more than Hillary Clinton to rub it in. And that's the only time I ever made a joke about Trump. But I try to stay away from it because it's just, it's low-hanging fruit, and also, Trump oftentimes is doing self-parody, and nothing looks dumber than if you parody self-parody. You really get caught not understanding.
So a parody of self-parody. That's how the late Norm Macdonald categorized the various jokes and comedy around Trump. I think that's pretty accurate. I think that maybe that's why it was just so distasteful. Trump was entertaining in itself. He didn't necessarily need to have these people who would come out. Sure, it would be great to have people who do the impressions. And, when Alec Baldwin did that before he was Gunslinger, it was interesting, because it was a very good attempt, sounded good. But then it just started going pretty crazy off the rails. And where you could see where the left in Hollywood kind of forgot how to do culture, how to do it correctly, how they're able to discuss satire or present it in a certain way. They got so wrapped up in political outcomes and opposition, the opposition, if we remember that they actually forgot the roots of their comedy. And that's why I think it'd be interesting to note, do you guys think that the right wing, the more conservatives, are actually now the standard bearers of comedy and satire? Perhaps not in the majority, but surely it's ascending. An example is the Babylon Bee, if you guys have ever heard of that. Very similar to The Onion, which is a satirical newspaper from many years ago. That's still out there, but they've had very good articles, and they tend to be sort of a conservative Christian alternative to many of the other comedic websites. So they actually have some fairly good jokes and plugs and little memes and videos that they put up every now and then. So I really much appreciate that, and I think it is really it is the harbinger of our times. The countercultures that exist in various societies, that's something that's very important when you're talking about opposition to communism and socialism in the 1980s in various parts of Eastern Europe, whether you're talking about the U.S. in the 1970s. Counterculture, because it is opposed to the governing structures, is really what inspires a generation. And considering that we have this new counterculture that is conservative, that is right-wing, that is libertarian, that is sort of against centralized politics, it could mean something new. And I do see a kind of new era for more right-leaning comedians to make their day and to get out there. There's definitely an audience for it. We saw it with Tim Allen's show, Last Man Standing, that had more of a conservative bent. I think there is going to be more of there's definitely a demand for this kind of stuff. Either more apolitical culture, a la more Norm Macdonald, like he was talking about, or generally more right-leaning and more conservative, comedic culture. I think that'd be really interesting. So you guys let me know what you think. You can always tweet at me, at Yael, Yaeloss, or definitely hit us up here on the Facebook stream if you're listening there, YouTube, or if you're listening on the radio, send an email, just Yael at bigtalkerfm.com. Love to hear what you guys are thinking. We got much more to come in the next hour. We're going to have an interview with a local Wilmington City Council candidate. We're going to have Jonathan Uscaguetti on to discuss the race and all that is important and happening here in the local Wilmington area. Till then, you're listening to Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski. Stay tuned to the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
What got me into the recovery business is a result of drug addiction with one of my sons. Anyone that has had a similar experience knows the pain involved and the many sleepless nights, the shame, the guilt, and the anger. After spending about 1.5 years at a local halfway house, my son and I decided to see if we could offer help to those suffering from addiction. A few years later, Prodigal Recovery opened its doors. We chose a name based on the familiar parable in the book of Luke. Part of the parable says, "My son was dead and is now alive. My son was lost and is now found. My son was dead and he was revived. He was lost and he is now found." Prodigal Recovery is a 12-bed home located about a half-mile west of the Cape Fear Hospital right off of Wrightsville Avenue. It's a 7-bedroom home, large entertainment room with billiards and more, covered outdoor area, and a gym. We believe fun and entertainment are important, and so is structured living. We offer that as well. You can reach Prodigal Recovery at 338-3795 or visit prodigalrecovery.org.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina, practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
This is Chad Adams, president of Red Wolf Broadcasting, proud to announce our fall lineup starting October of 2021. From 7 to 10 a.m., we have Joe Catanacci covering all of the local issues of the day and looking at some of the national things that are happening. Then Mike Gallagher, one of America's longest-running talk show hosts, from 10 to noon. From noon to 3 p.m., we have the up-and-coming Clay Travis and Buck Sexton. You're going to love that show. And then one of the toughest hosts in America, Dana Lash, from 3 to 6 p.m. So join us each and every day, Monday through Friday, here on the Big Talker FM.
KO's Coast to Coast Tree Service is paying top dollar for experienced climbers and groundsmen. This is hard work for real men, and we're having a heck of a time finding anybody around here that's not all tattoo and truck, but no tough. If you know somebody from another state with tree work experience who wants to move down here, not only will KO help them with their living expenses, but it'll also pay you $100 cash for referring them. We have an immediate need for real men who can work hard. Call KO today at 910-233-2816 and visit kotrees.com.
So it is with the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
In your heart, you know he's right.
I hear there's rumors on the internets.
Good morning, Wilmington. Welcome here to the Big Talker Mornings. Every single morning, 7 to 10 a.m. I am your host today, Yaël Ossowski. I'll be here today and tomorrow. My normal gig is as Deputy Director of the Consumer Choice Center, and you might have heard me on Consumer Choice Radio that broadcasts Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on the Big Talker. We started off with a great hour in the morning. Listen to some of the interview with former South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford, and also got some of the latest news and clippings from the local elections that are happening throughout the day tomorrow, or you might have voted already by mail. Talked a little bit about what's happening with Joe Biden overseas, talking about the climate change accords, the conference, and how all of the taxation for global companies is going to go up. So a lot is happening there. Plenty of updates in the world of sports, as you guys have seen. But one thing I wanted to zone in on right now, since I got the mic, is about Elon Musk and global poverty. I think this is a really important point and underscores much of our political divide, much of our political dialogue, and where a lot of people are left astray. Because the essential idea by many groups, many nonprofit groups, is that we have X number of problems in society. And we have Y, which is basically rich people's money. Let's imagine Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, whomever. If we just take Y and add it to X, we should solve all problems. As in, the more money that we just throw into big issues, the more we can solve them. We hear this all the time with homelessness. We heard it all the time with poverty. And now we're talking about world hunger. And how this kind of came about is, we're seeing in the news every single day that Elon Musk, thanks to Tesla, thanks to SpaceX, thanks to Starlink and all the various companies that he heads, because they are making so much money, he now has on paper this great wealth. I don't know what it even is anymore, something like $200 or $300 billion, probably approaching even higher than that at some point. Now that's money that's on paper because it's mostly on stock, and if you were to sell all the stock, the price would crash, and there'd be more reverberations than you could ever know. But essentially, that's why Elon Musk oscillates between being the richest person in the world or number 2 or number 3. It kind of depends on the day. Well, a lot of people are incensed by this money. They don't like that someone is rich. They don't like that someone is a millionaire and a billionaire. We know Bernie Sanders would say that. And a lot of various nonprofits love to go out there and bash the billionaires, the billionaire bashing hour. And one of them who did so is the director of the World Food Program. This is a United Nations organization that has been trying to solve world hunger for many, many years. Apparently, they say 2% of Elon Musk's wealth would solve all of world hunger. That's what they said in an interview. So that, causes us to think about it. Well, let's say that Elon Musk did just grant $6 billion to world hunger. Well, where would that go? Does that go to a nonprofit group? Does that go to the local Boys and Girls Club? Does that go to a farmers group? Where would that money go to solve world hunger, quote unquote? Because it's not just that $6 billion you pay a meal for everybody in the world at one time. You can't do that because you've solved world hunger for one meal. So I'll have all these other meals. So what are you going to do? And this is what the director of the UN Food Program did say in an interview. And most of the time, these things happen all the time. We hear them. People bash the billionaires. Well, Elon Musk is very active on his Twitter account and actually wrote, he said, hey, if the World Food Program can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. And he adds, but it must be open source accounting so the public sees precisely how the money is spent. Huh. Well, he's kind of calling him on this, I think. You said, okay, you say $6 billion is all you need. Okay, what would you do? How would you do it? Where would the money go? Because if we know anything about these international bureaucracies, yeah, they're very cushy jobs, believe me. Near where I live, there's plenty of people who have these type of jobs. They can afford these great homes and apartments, don't have to pay taxes in some instances. They live great. And as we know, most of the money is just going to go to administration. It's not going to go necessarily to the people. That's why I think Elon Musk is cutting at something a bit deeper here, is how exactly can we solve complex problems like poverty and hunger? Well, it doesn't happen because there happens to be a UN organization. I'll tell you that right now. I can give you many other examples. However, someone like Elon, who is an entrepreneur, who's providing things, I think provides the best example as to why the UN food model doesn't work. If we think of a city, this is an example from the economist Milton Friedman. If we think of a city every single day, who feeds all of the people in that city? Well, the people feed themselves because of incentives. The baker has the incentive to bake his bread and to sell that at a profit to customers who are willing to pay for it so that they can eat. You take that for any restaurant, any grocery store, it's much the same. There's no central organized entity, God forbid a UN entity, that is deciding how a city of Wilmington, is fed every single day. It's people making individual decisions. It's spontaneous order. And the idea that we can just solve X or Y problem willy-nilly with just a huge infusion of cash is just wrong, but it's much more than wrong. It's a type of fatal conceit. It's a kind of belief that we can have centralized power, centralized organization, and that human beings who are economic actors, we can't really just be driven by this. We can't necessarily just be put into squares or into holes as pegs. Human beings are complicated and economics is complicated. And you need to develop a system of incentives so that people can continue to build things. They can continue to provide food to people in their city. So that they continue farming for crops that they can then sell, that's then put into the grocery stores or sold to restaurants to sell as meals. This is a whole complex affair, and I think many of you might not hear this each and every day. I hear it all the time in my day-to-day, that if only a particular organization or branch of government had billions of dollars, it could carry on and do well and solve all the problems in the world. I mean, we see that with our own IRS, Internal Revenue Service. They're asking for, I don't know what it is now. I think it's like $400 million for a budget. Many people, including 7 million Americans, have yet to receive their tax returns for 2020. There's 2 months left in this year of 2021, and people have still not received their returns from last year. Okay, so this is the organization that is not efficient at all. With 400 million, we can do more. Yeah. We can hire more people. We'd be much more efficient. Really? Where's the proof there? Very similar to this. I think this claim that Elon is putting out there, I think if every wealthy person did this, and did this specifically to people who try to shame them, there'd be a big attitude change. Because it's not as if Elon Musk spending money on rockets or Jeff Bezos spending money on rockets takes away from your meal at the end of the week. It's not how it goes. It's this false idea of a fixed pie. Everybody's got a percentage. And the billionaires have more. When in reality, the billionaires have in their own way expanded the pie. Definitely in their favor. But a lot of people along the way, if you invested in Tesla, if you've bought one, if you invested in Amazon, if you've used Amazon, all of these products and services serve consumers, they serve people, they help people out. I think that's a good thing. It's a great thing that we have in our society. And we should be celebrating this a lot more, rather than trying to shame people out of billions of dollars out of their pocket because you're jealous or because you want to grow your bureaucracy or something else. You just feel very bad about yourself. I think there's a lot of these people who exist. And unfortunately, even if they did get the money, I think they would probably be worse off in the end. Because it's never just about the money. It's about the control. It's about the power. There's no such thing as a temporary government program. We remember those words of former President Ronald Reagan. So we'll keep watching this with Musk. I think he's a very interesting and eccentric character because he can't really be boxed, right? You don't know exactly what he's thinking. You don't exactly know Elon Musk, what he's going to say today or tomorrow. He could come out and say, I'm done with all of this business. I'm selling it off and moving to the desert. He could. He could. Guy already lives in a box in the desert, I think. So that's the Elon Musk story. There's going to be maybe there'll be some competition for most eccentric billionaire. I think there'll be a couple more things that are coming out there. Love to see it. Love to see it. So we have our interview next. We're talking with Jonathan, who is a counselor for a candidate for Wilmington for the city council. Jonathan Uscaguetti. Very excited to talk to him in the next segment. You're listening to The Big Talker, 106.7 FM. We'll be right back after this. And we're here on The Big Talker with Jonathan Uscaguetti, who is here running for city council in Wilmington, North Carolina. Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So there's a lot of stuff that's happening around Wilmington, around the area. But I think before we get into any of that and into your background, which of course is very impressive, definitely want to hear more about your upbringing. I know there's a couple of stories that you wanted to address, things that were hitting the wire. We saw some things in the Port City Daily News, all the rest. Tell us a little bit about your reaction to the stories that are coming out now. Obviously, Election Day is coming near, and that means that the opposition is going to put stuff out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, let me tell you, my name is Jonathan Uscaguetti. I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela. I moved here a little over 20 years ago. I am an American citizen by choice, Venezuelan by birth. And the problem that I see right now with the very leftist media that we have here, if you can call that, they are working in conjunction with local Black Lives Matter. And it's a campaign that they started probably four days ago, very aggressively towards my name. It's because, I'm originally from Venezuela, and these people understand what it make their narrow to be in threat. I've been talking about socialism since I started my campaign. The country right now is going through a transition very similar to the transition that we went in Venezuela. And these people understand very well that the way I talk is going to make their narrow to be very, very, I'm going to be exposing a lot of stuff. And they don't like that. That's the problem. They just don't like what I have to say because it's going to expose the what do you say, the scandal they're trying to run in our communities in this country.
Yeah, I think there have been a good number of sort of stories and things I've seen, and as you mentioned, the activists that are working together against you. Obviously, we know that this has to do with politics, and it's a very political time, and particularly the Black Lives Matter group around Wilmington has been gaining steam. Do you think it has to do a lot more with you personally? Does it have more to do with the election? What do you think that's about?
It is a personal. Once again, I'm from Venezuela. See, I recognize exactly what this Marxist organization are trying to do to this great nation. They're trying to disguise their real true intention. Their intention is to destabilize and dismantle this great nation. And since I noticed it, because the same ideologies were pushed to us in Venezuela, they know very well this is not going to play well when I get elected. This is going to be they're really infiltrating the city of Wilmington. These people are, you see them everywhere. It seems like nobody can say or do anything to these people. And they know when I get elected, I'm pro law enforcement. We're going to have to bring a very strong law enforcement in the city to make sure that we don't have people running the city, like this, running around with no order in the city.
Definitely. We're speaking with Jonathan Uscaguetti here on The Big Talker, 106.7 FM. He is a candidate for the Wilmington City Council. Election day is tomorrow, so you guys get out there if you haven't already put in your votes. Jonathan, going over to your website, you got a number of issues. Obviously, you mentioned law and order and police. One question on here, and something that we've definitely talked about here at the station a lot, is zoning and tax issues. Wilmington is under constant development and improvement, you say on your website. This means that we are constantly dealing with zoning issues pertaining to small and medium businesses and the tax implications that surround those transactions. So what are some ways that we can improve zoning here in the city of Wilmington? Obviously, it's booming. It's one of the fastest growing areas of the country. What can we better do, and what will you do if you are elected to the city council when it comes to things like zoning?
Well, I got to tell you one thing. I'm not a real estate guy, and I think we have to be a little bit more sensible, a sensible way how we're building around the town. I feel like we do not are prepared for a good infrastructure with our road right now. I think the city needs to start working in conjunction with the county and the state to put pressure into the DOT and the federal government to spend and fix the roads in the city of Wilmington. Traffic is really, really bad. I feel like since I moved here, I've been seeing construction happening with no planning. That's just the way it looks. There's no actually a plan while we're building the way we're building. We haven't been able to create bigger roads before we started keep building the way we are. I noticed there's a lot of trees have been pulling out. There's no green areas anymore. So every time you have rain, heavy rains in Wilmington, the streets get flooded because there's no trees there with roots to hopefully, help out with the water as raining here. I just think that we need to start being a little bit more careful how we do in the building in the city of Wilmington. I believe have to do with just too many real estate people in the city council that we have to, have a little bit more awareness of that. Bring some balance and put people like myself. I'm a business owner of the restaurant. I'm a gym owner, and I have a food truck. So when I get elected, I'm going to be looking into work for the community, not for any, entity around here.
So you mentioned you're not a real estate guy, but you are someone who is a business owner, as you mentioned, small business owner, and you are a jiu-jitsu black belt, if I understand correctly. What are the kind of lessons that you've learned from jiu-jitsu that you think would be important to mounting a political career, particularly in a city like Wilmington on a diverse city council?
Well, I'll tell you, jiu-jitsu, they call it the human chess. When you train jiu-jitsu or any fighting, I was a boxer, kickboxer. I'm also a black belt in judo. Fighting is about thinking. Fighting is about, it's like chess. You got to move one piece, have a strategy as you play the game. I feel that there's something that I'm going to bring into the city of Wilmington. It is actually put some more conservative way how things are going in the city. I'll tell you one thing. Right now, we're down 50 police officers. The fire department is not getting the funding that they need. We're failing in the very basis what it's like to have local government. It's fire department and police officers. We're failing on that. Our police officers right now are not getting paid enough. So what do? They start looking for jobs somewhere else. We're sending people to the academy to become police officers for the city of Wilmington. And what do after they graduate? They always look for a job somewhere else. So we do not have a great retention program for the fire department and police department. Some of the things there that I look at it, that, I think other people are not looking into. Small business. I think we need to help the small business by overlooking into all the regulations and red tape. They're putting in chokehold into our community, small business community. I'm a small business. I own a restaurant and a food truck. But let me tell you, in a gym, there's sometimes these regulations that I think we need to take a look at these regulations and see exactly what's working, what is not working, to be removed to help the small business and have more people that want to actually open small business in the city.
Yeah, one thing that is very important to Wilmington, particularly once we have the summer months, is tourism. And there's a lot of questions about COVID and whether people are returning and whether we're going to have people that are visiting from other states. When it comes to tourism, in your potential role as a city councilor, how do you see the future of tourism, particularly in the Wilmington area?
Well, we have to, like I say, think about it. We have to have a good place for people to come and eat. That's the number one thing when people come to travel. I want to be able to make sure that we preserve the downtown Wilmington. People come here because we have a beautiful historic downtown Wilmington. I think we have to make sure the downtown stay open. I know a lot of business during COVID went through a lot of problems, and they didn't make it after COVID. So we have a lot of business that closed in downtown. I feel if something happened to downtown, it's gonna completely mess up our tourist industry here in Wilmington. People don't come here to go to Landfall or Mayfair. They come here for our beach and the downtown area, the beautiful historic downtown area. So we got to make sure to help these people in downtown. They can keep, growing their business and they stay open so people can come here.
So we're speaking with Jonathan Uscaguetti, who is a candidate for Wilmington City Council. Jonathan, if you had to give your closing statement, let's imagine you're on the debate stage with many of your opponents. If you had to give your closing statement as to why you are the best candidate yourself for this position, what would you say?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I look at a lot of things right now in this country. I came from Venezuela. I see how socialism is completely started to take a destruction all over the nation. In the city, I look at a lot of things in the city right now. We're spending close to $1 million, something that they has called diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's exactly how my native country got destroyed. These programs are growing rapidly in the city of Wilmington. I want to make sure that we stop and get educated some of our elected officials around here. I think they've been taking some people in there in the city of Wilmington, or they're doing this on purpose, or they just don't know what they're doing there. I'm going to be also donating my whole entire salary to nonprofit organizations like Vigilant Hope and First Fruit Ministry. I'm going to be doing this because when I came to this country gave me so much. It's been nothing but a blessing since I moved here. So I felt like it was time to get back to the country and to the city that has given me so much. For that reason, I feel like I'm one of the best candidates to become your city council. I'm not doing this to get rich, to get kicked back by any real estate, cabal in the city. Or any other entity. I'm doing this for the people of Wilmington.
Well, there you go. Closing statement from Jonathan Uscaguetti. You can find him on the ballot for Wilmington City Council tomorrow on Election Day. Jonathan, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
And we'll be right back here on The Big Talker, 106.7 FM. More to come after this. Big Talker Mornings here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM, coming to you every morning 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. My name is Yaël Ossowski. I am your host for today and tomorrow. We've got some great content coming in the next day or two, and I hope you guys stay tuned. Had a great interview there just last segment. We were able to speak with Jonathan Uscaguetti about the Wilmington City Council race and his own candidature, and how far he'd like to go, and what his plans would be. And I know we're going to have some more interviews throughout the week, and it is an important day, as tomorrow is Election Day here locally in Wilmington, and really throughout the country there are municipal elections. So if you are interested in local politics, as you should be, you should get out to that polling place, whatever it is, pull the handle, poke out the dot, cross the mark. Who knows what they do these days? It really depends. It's fairly different in every other jurisdiction. Kind of interesting. So one thing that we wanted to talk about this hour, some of you might be listening to this on Facebook. And Facebook is going through a bit of a change as the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, basically came out and told us in a video presentation, Facebook will be changing its name to Meta, meaning part of the metaverse. If you guys don't know what the metaverse is, it is the meeting between virtual and physical reality. So there are many people who play video games. They have all types of controllers. Maybe they use an Oculus Rift, or they use some of these amazing VR headsets. They plug in, they're able to create a new world. They're able to, it's much like playing The Sims. If any of you have ever played The Sims, the metaverse is sort of the idea of The Sims, to where, yes, you have your character that's in the house, that's cooking the meal, and you remove the ladder when they go to the pool or whatever, but then also you can project your friends in there. You can have meetings, you can watch videos together, host websites, this kind of stuff. So this will be a multi-billion-dollar effort of Facebook to invest into what's happening, apparently $10 billion worth, to develop hardware, software, and content around that. I think this is very interesting because it is the changing nature of social media. We love to hate on social media, particularly on conservative talk radio, even though there is a lot of help that social media provides talk radio. If you look at the most read articles on things like Facebook or on Twitter, oftentimes they are conservative-leaning sources. They're Daily Caller, Daily Wire. Somehow I got on the Daily Wire list, and I've been getting their articles like crazy. So I had to click around, get some other stuff too. But if you look around, these websites, the conservative sites are doing really well, and basically that's buoying all the other media, things like radio, as we mentioned before, things like television. But to see how Facebook will do this would be very interesting. We're talking about billions of users. And as you know, I am not a Facebook skeptic. You've heard me on this program. You've heard me with Joe Catanacci when he was here on the program, discuss and debate it. You heard me on Consumer Choice Radio. I think Facebook has provided a great benefit to many people, including myself. I think it has connected communities. It's allowed us to be able to reach out to our friends and family, particularly when we move, and allows us to keep up a kind of community. It's a kind of virtual Rolodex. And I know there's a lot of haters who say you don't need it, you just have a phone, but the algorithms and the things that are built into Facebook and the ability to share news means that you don't have to talk to anyone directly, but you could be sharing news with them for over a decade. And the next time that you meet, maybe you will not have exchanged numbers and messages the entire time, but you'll be caught up on each other's lives and you'll have things in common to discuss. it's something that was very new, just whatever it was a decade ago when this came to be, and now is very powerful. Now, what will it mean with virtual reality headsets and people putting rooms together on these digital platforms and people hanging out in my virtual living room? I don't really know what it'll look like. I think it'll be a lot of fun. It'll definitely be interesting. There'll be a lot of critics who take the Luddite stance and say, social media, we don't need any of this, or very skeptical of the metaverse itself and Meta. It's kind of a bold move because we don't really know what's going to happen with these other sections of Facebook's businesses. They have Facebook, they have WhatsApp, they have Instagram. Oculus Rift is the virtual reality headset. So it seems that's going to take the cake in terms of where a lot of stuff is going. But still, the moneymaker is probably Instagram and Facebook. Those are the big money makers. So you don't necessarily want to shift out of those, but you do want to perhaps adapt some of the things from the other business units so they do well. We'll see what happens. If you are not a fan of Facebook, well, yeah, I know. There's a lot of fodder for you recently, isn't there? There's the whistleblower that came out, Frances Haugen. She put out the documents stating that Facebook had done its own research and knew the impact on teen girls when it comes to eating disorders and reality and searches and algorithms, and we've heard these things many times before. Nothing to poo-poo at. I think these are serious kind of allegations, but we have to look at basically what draws people to this. And what we've heard for years, and conservative listeners would know, what we've heard for years is that Facebook stole the election for Donald Trump or swayed the election for Donald Trump. We've heard that plenty of times. So just forgive me whenever I am once again brought to another accusation about Facebook and how it's all-encompassing and controls absolutely everything in the world. Sorry, I have a little bit of agency. I mean, if we have to think back, there was actually a couple years ago that Facebook was the grand darling, particularly of leftist politics. There's a great clip of Barack Obama when he was president meeting with Zuckerberg, and it's the most jovial brofest I think I've ever heard. Let's roll that clip, producer.
I will say, and I hate to tell stories on Mark, but the first time we had dinner together, and he wore this jacket and tie, I'd say halfway through dinner, he's starting to sweat a little bit. It's really uncomfortable for him. So I helped him out of his jacket. And in fact, if you'd like, Mark, we can take our jackets off. Okay.
No, that's good.
All right, nice and jovial. Obama and Zuckerberg laughing it up. Man, Zuckerberg looks like a little kid. But you could saw it was a very jovial attitude. Obama talked about how Zuckerberg had probably been to the White House. They had dinner together. Joke, 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 laugh. But then Obama actually comes up with a very interesting story about why Facebook is important for democracy and why it's important for society as a whole. And I thought this was fascinating because it's directly contravening what we hear today. And I'm going to give you a small little snippet as to why I think that is the case. So roll that clip, producer.
The main reason we want to do this is, first of all, because more and more people, especially young people, are getting their information through different media. And obviously what all of you have built together is helping to revolutionize how people get information, how they process information, how they're connecting with each other. And historically, part of what makes for a healthy democracy, what is a good politics, is when you've got citizens who are informed, who are engaged. And what Facebook allows us to do is make sure this isn't just a one-way conversation. Make sure that not only am I speaking to you, but you're also speaking back, and we're in a conversation, we're in a dialogue.
So let me get this straight. During the reign of President Obama, Facebook was necessary for a healthy democracy. The dialogue was a good thing. It was important to have people discussing issues, collaborating, commenting, having two-way conversations, as Obama said. Well, nowadays, whenever I turn on the television, or whenever I roll through the newspapers on the websites, I hear that Facebook is evil. I hear that it's wrecked democracy. It's burnt it to the ground. That we're we're totally screwed without it. Facebook has left us. It's put us in this position where we don't know how we're going to get our democracy back. Very strange how the narrative turns in just a few years. And you can lay it again. I hate that this is true, but it is. It all has to do with Trump. It all leads back to Trump. It's just because of the election in 2016. It's because of the upset. It's because people started using Facebook ads, people who were not the Obama administration. The Obama administration ran a very impressive data analytics game very early on in 2008. They had a good number of very smart individuals who understood how to use data, how to do election retention analysis to find who are the voters, where they are, how to reach them. And they used things like Salesforce and Facebook ads to reach out to these folks. And we see that that's exactly what Trump did. That's what he hired people to do. That's what a lot of people who were on the Trump team did at that time. And really, ever since that time, Facebook has been seen as this great public enemy because, yes, it's a great tool for expression, but it also gives freedom of speech to the other side. And that's why I don't think we should be too hasty about trying to regulate Facebook or break it up, because all it is a platform. It's a tool. It's a thing that we use. One day it'll be another team that's loud. The next day it'll be yours. But as long as we preserve that tool and try to protect that tool, then we know that we can let the best arguments win. Because they would love to see a lot of accounts shut down. They'd love to suspend the lot of you for what you're writing about, what you're thinking about, what you're talking about. They'd love to do so. So why would you give the government the power to do so? You only know that the pendulum is going to swing right back on you, because that's what happens every single time. This is not new. This has happened many times over. If we empower the government to take over a particular role, to have a certain say in how our regulation is, it will come back to bite us, as we know. So more to come here on Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski. We'll be right back after this break. We're getting towards the end of hour number 2, and looking forward to some great stuff coming up. Stay tuned.
Citronovo bledé slnko zažalo ďalší zimný deň.
Big Talker Mornings here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. Yaël Ossowski here, broadcasting for Monday and Tuesday. Monday, November 1st. Happy November, everybody. If you're liking the music, this is actually a friend of mine, Richard Durana. He is a Slovak singer and songwriter. You can find his Spotify page pretty easily. He's got some great tunes, great melodies. And look, I don't understand what he's saying, but Slovak seems to be a very beautiful language. So interesting to know. So a couple things that we're looking at here for the rest of this. We're finishing up hour number 2. Coming up here, we'll have a break after this, and much more to come in our last hour. Thank you guys for tuning in this morning. We've talked a little bit about what's happening overseas with the Climate Change Summit, the G20, the G7, minimum corporate taxation, how that will impact you as an individual. A little bit about Elon Musk challenging the World Food Program, the United Nations, on exactly how they're going to solve world hunger if he were to give them $6 billion. I love that he just called them out. I think that was very interesting to hear and to see, and we'll see if they actually take him up. He's like a betting guy, so we'll see if the UN bureaucrats will follow up on that. I very much doubt it, but we shall see. I talked a little bit about the metaverse as well. I think this is the Facebook inspired theme of the week, and a little bit about Facebook hate and how things have changed since the time of Barack Obama, because back in the day, Facebook, as we remember, was the promised child of the Barack Obama age. Could do no wrong, connected communities, was very healthy for democracy. Now, as more conservatives are getting on there and people with alternative views are getting on there. Now it is the devil, it's the enemy, we got to get rid of it, blah, 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 blah. You've heard all the arguments. So there's a lot of that has been going around the news wires and much more that is critical. And we cannot forget that tomorrow here in the Wilmington area is Election Day, Tuesday. You guys can find all of your different polling places. You should have received your notices by mail. In case you did not, you can go head on over to the New Hanover Board of Elections website, New Hanover County. You can find all of the different polling places, all the different offices as well. For Wilmington City specific, we have the mayoral race and the city council race. And we were able to hear from Jonathan Uscaguetti about his run for the city council, his vision for the city, what he'd like to see. A lot of emphasis on law and order. I think that's something that's been brought up a lot in the context of Wilmington and everything that's been happening. There's been a couple of shootings that I know you guys have heard about. There have been some fairly large thefts that have been publicized. Generally not looking good for law and order. So an interesting time to do that. At the same time, a lot of pressure on the police, a lot of pressure on what's happening in our cities and in the schools. So we'll see what happens with that. Otherwise, a fairly small election when you think nationally, but these are the ones that really matter. Because locally, if you want to try to talk to the person and do something down at your school who's actually going to change things on the roadway, that's probably going to be your mayor, your city council, any of that. So if you are in New Hanover County, head on over to the Board of Elections website. You can check that out. And also in Brunswick County, a good number of mayoral elections too. Some of these mayors are running unopposed. I saw that. I mean, if it was me, I would just put my name on there and at least give these guys some competition. But I saw a couple of mayors running unopposed. Tell me, they cannot be doing that great of a job that not a single resident or citizen is opposed to them. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But either way, we'll see what happens in the next day. We'll get our results back. Probably not going to be a nail biter throughout the day. Another thing we discussed was the kind of the change of comedy that we've had in the country in the past, I would say 10 years. Is we've had a shifting, again, it all points back to Trump, with everything related to satire and political comedy. And there's an article about this phenomenon that I mentioned earlier, this Let's Go Brandon, which if you don't know what that is and you're listening to Conservative Talk Radio, I fear the plane has left the station, or the train has left the station. But there's an article here about how a pilot is under investigation for saying, quote, "Let's go Brandon." His remarks went viral. This is according to the New York Times. His remarks went viral after he repeated the chant, which is understood to be code for swearing at President Biden during a Southwest Airlines flight. This is the beginning of this. It began as a chant at a NASCAR race. It became an inside joke among many Republicans that spread to T-shirts and even to the floor of Congress. And now it has entangled Southwest Airlines in the nation's political tussles. Let's go, Brandon. Okay, interesting. So this is going on a little bit. This is spreading, and as we mentioned, this is satire. And I think what is crazy to hear is that people are so offended by this. This is apparently what's happening is there were audible gasps from some passengers, according to a reporter who was on the plane. Oh my. All because of a chant for NASCAR driver Brandon Brown. My goodness. Yeah. There are probably going to be more of these instances. I know that Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has been using this and saying that a lot. Representative Bill Posey, who's a Republican from Florida. There's a lot of billboards. I mean, we've seen this kind of go crazy, and it's really fascinating because at the same time it is satire. Unfortunately, it might be just yet another unfurling of the culture war. You guys know the culture war, right? The thing that we do just to own the libs or own the cons. The small little trivial things that are like coded language and tribalism. I know there's more of these that are happening every day, and the culture war is very tiresome, I think. I don't participate in it too much. I find it is a waste of time, a waste of energy. There are many things to get mad about. And mostly it has to do with the people who have power and the people who are changing rules that will actually impact and harm you. I'm more upset about that. There are things I don't like in the culture. There are things I disagree with in the culture that happened. But I'm not going to stake my happiness and spend my time on all of that, because culture wars are not a thing that you win or lose. Culture wars are just a passing time. They're there to pass the time. People do culture wars in between elections. It's essentially politics played out on the cultural scene. When you're not fighting an election, you might as well be trying to fight the ideological battles using culture. I think that is not the best use of our time. We have many more great things to do. There's so many great ideas that we could contribute to, so many great businesses that we could run. There's so much great stuff that could come from our own individual minds if we were to just get away from the cultural war narrative. And we don't have to feed into this. We don't have to buy into it. I know there are many people, particularly a lot of leftist groups, that would love to flare this up and get it all going on around trans bathrooms, all kinds of other things. This is not necessarily where we should spend all of our time when we're talking about the American experiment. These issues will pop up locally from time to time, and they will. But if we continue to get riled up in this larger culture war, it means we're not contributing to the American project in a way that continues to protect our liberties, protect our freedoms, and to protect the economic freedom that we have to provide for our families. I think that that's something that cannot be too far removed from the conversations. A lot of it makes great fodder for great comedy. Let me tell you, makes very, very, very good comedy at times. The culture war does. But it also, what is it really achieving? Because as we know, culture changes so quickly, it could flip back on us at any time. And it's better not to put all of our cards in that basket. It's like a terrible cryptocurrency that you invest in and might go up one day, might peak, might go up 800%. But then, the next day, it'll cave by about 2,000%. So we don't want to put too many of our eggs in that basket. I think there's better stuff that we can focus our time on. Think of those municipal elections, folks, that are happening in Wilmington. Have you listened to the interviews with some of the candidates? Have you read the articles? I know in the local paper they've been able to feature some of the thoughts of the local candidates and what they would like to do once in office. Have you seen that? Have you read that? I think that's worth it a bit more than the culture war. We don't necessarily have to continue pushing on that, but so it goes. We're finishing up the hour here on Big Talker, 106.7 FM. It's been a great morning here, just going into the 9 o'clock hour. Been able to cover a lot of great topics, and I know that those of you who are listening, whether it be on Facebook or on YouTube, on the radio, in your car, online, at home, hopefully you've been entertained as well. So we have much more to come here for the rest of Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski, honing in the mic, keeping it sharp and clean and free of any BS for you this morning. We'll be right back here on Big Talker Mornings after this.
So it is with the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
In your heart, you know he's right.
I hear there's rumors on the internets.
And welcome to Wilmington's Big Talker in the morning. I'm your host this morning, Yaël Ossowski. You normally hear me as a radio host on Consumer Choice Radio, and you've heard me on this station before. Thank you guys for tuning in for our final hour, heading into 9 o'clock, just past the news break. A lot of stuff happening in the world, but you're tuned in here, and we love it. Thank you so much for being here. Again, you can listen to us not just on your radio dial, but also by going over to the website, bigtalkerfm.com, over on the Facebook page, and on YouTube as well. We're streaming in multiple locations, being sure we get the message out. Not to forget the apps that are available on your phone, on your smartphone, on both the Android store and the Apple store. you can find Big Talker WFBT there in the lineup. Some of you are used to hearing Joe Catanacci here in this slot in the morning. Joe has departed for Fair Shores. He is off at WRRN in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He's got his own morning show now, competing with ours here on the Big Talker. So you can find that station. You'll be able to catch up with Joe, but we're concentrating on the city of Wilmington. We mentioned in the first 2 hours, we've got our municipal elections that are happening tomorrow. Some of you might have already voted, might have already sent in your ballots. Maybe you were incensed enough, it's what has happened in the past year, that you sent that in early and furiously and wrote down your choice. And choice you do have. We've got the mayoral election here in Wilmington. We've got city council seats and basically every mayor race, essentially, in every town around Brunswick and New Hanover counties. Hopefully you guys got your ballots in, and if you're following along, and usually you tend to be quite smart if you're tuned in to talk radio. It means you're well aware of the issues. Whether you have just moved here, whether you've been here for years, you kind of know civically what's going on, and you are engaged on the topics. So good to know that we have you and can count on you as listeners going forward. So for the next segment here, well, there's a couple things to highlight. Actually, just got this news notice. We've avoided talking about COVID for the entire show so far. The entire morning has been COVID-free, ladies and gentlemen, unlike the White House, apparently. This is an article from the Times. Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, has tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, this is not a gloating moment. Nobody wishes any illness upon anyone that they know, and surely would not like that. But for someone who has taken such care, someone who's really done everything possible to be super, super secure, staying 6 feet apart, wearing the mask at all times, washing the hands like crazy, following all of the guidelines, probably not going out to restaurants, Ms. Psaki has herself come down with COVID and coronavirus, as does happen to many people, even though she was double vaccinated, maybe even had a third one, we don't know. A lot of people are getting boosters nowadays. But this is kind of interesting because it just shows that it really doesn't matter how good you're prepared. It really doesn't matter what kind of government guidelines you follow or that you champion for others, because we have to remember that Psaki is the White House press secretary, so she officially represents the thoughts and ideas of the entire Biden administration. And there has been a lot of shame and shade thrown at many of you. Those who are unvaccinated, those who don't wear masks. You've heard it all, and a lot of it has come from Ms. Psaki here. But she has come down with the virus, unfortunately. Wish her the best of health. Don't want anything bad at all to result of this. But it just shows that there's no way to really control this in a good way. Because people who are the most secure, who are the most safe, the most paranoid about all of this, they've succumbed to the virus as well. So it's not necessarily anything that can be eradicated, and zero COVID as a policy is pretty idiotic when we think about it, because there's no way we're going to completely eradicate the flu. There's absolutely no way we're going to completely eradicate this coronavirus. But here we are, we're in 2021, in November, on the 1st, still talking about this. I wish it didn't have to be the case, but that's how it is. We did hear some I guess, better news. It's not going to put you in the the most not the most positive spin on what's happening. But what's been happening with the lab leak hypothesis? Do you guys remember that? The lab leak hypothesis was the idea that perhaps the origin of COVID rested not upon a food wet market in Wuhan, China, but actually the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they were doing gain-of-function research on various bats and animals, and essentially some kind of leak happened. The virus got out. Perhaps it was brought to the wet market. It spread from there, and that's why we have not been able to get this really handled, because it was created in a kind of laboratory, and we were not able to put those vaccines together quickly enough. So that's one theory that we've heard about. Again, if you had stated that opinion on social media some months ago, you would have been blocked, you would have been banned, you would have been scrapped. It's important to note that they had a lot of pressure from governments, from various nonprofits to do that. So Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, all of them. And what have we learned in the last couple of weeks? We've learned that actually there have been many grants that have been offered from the National Institutes of Health, which is Dr. Anthony Fauci's organization, to groups that are doing gain-of-function research. I don't think you need to be that deep into the details to understand what gain-of-function research is. It's ideally the idea that we invest time and energy and effort into manipulating a current virus so that it gains functions, so that it becomes more contagious, more deadly, as a way of creating a potential vaccine or seeing how we could actually treat people who might have these types of diseases. It's a very risky type of science. It is done in many different areas, but let's say the big phrase we got from Anthony Fauci and the National Institutes of Health is that their department never funded any gain-of-function research, and specifically not in Wuhan, China. We heard this over and over. We heard many in the liberal cable news television media who are mocking Rand Paul for even making this assertion, calling him a liar, giving him Pinocchios at the Washington Post and all these other papers. And then we have this letter that came out 2 weeks ago from the National Institutes of Health, and they were responding to an inquiry basically stating that, yes, we offer these grants to this nonprofit called EcoHealth that did do gain-of-function research, some of it related to China, some of it related to coronaviruses, some of it related to other viruses and diseases. I have yet to see a single interview where Anthony Fauci has been tested or quizzed on this, because if it is true, then he has lied to Congress blatantly and openly. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal because this is supposed to be our chief, corona checker-in-chief. This is supposed to be our top doctor. And he's lying to us about it. He's lying in Congress about it, which is, I'm not going to say it's the worst crime in the world, but it is a crime. Now, this to me is I think the biggest part of this that really had me going is just that we don't really know 100% about the origins. And where does the origin lie? It lies with the Chinese Communist Party. I think we'd have to do an entire segment on China and the Chinese Communist Party to understand more about their influence and how much wrong they are for the world. But the fact that we put so much trust in the Chinese Communist Party, this is an institution that only exists to further itself, that has spread itself so wide, not just in mainland China, but is looking to gobble up other sections and territories. They are notorious for lying, for deceiving, for hiding the truth, for obfuscating. This is what they do. This is the Chinese Communist Party in a nutshell, and we got all the knowledge about the beginning of the pandemic from the Chinese Communist Party, from the CCP, and that has been problematic from the get-go, from the start. It gets you riled up because we know that's where it's coming from, yet the World Health Organization, all of these big entities, they keep parroting the lines of what the CCP has stated. I mean, even if you look at the numbers now, I think they have 2,000 COVID cases in all of China. I mean, we have more of those in, the eastern part of North Carolina. It's absolutely ridiculous. So we know they're lying about many different things, probably lying about the origin, definitely lying about case count, definitely lying about, whether or not they're silencing people. We remember that from the beginning of the pandemic. Doctors and journalists who are being shut down, who had their accounts shut down, who are being deleted, who are being disappeared. This is the normal Chinese Communist Party way. We would hope that this would not be the strand of ideological thought that would continue to persist in the American government here in 2021. But the way that Anthony Fauci has carried on, the way that he has found himself impervious to critics, that he cannot be brought down any pegs, and that everything he does is good and holy. I mean, there's a brand new documentary about him, the Fauci documentary. I haven't watched it yet, but it just adds to that persona. And, it's all well and good if we're getting the great decisions and that people are, becoming very healthy and we're not facing these issues anymore. But we still face many restrictions. People are still dying, and there's still a lot of questions. and there's a lot of freedoms that are being curbed all along the way. So we have to ask ourselves, is this the kind of era of Fauci? Is this what we want to be living in? Is this what we want to be doing? Will he be held accountable? Not sure about that. I hope it happens because, look, we need some truth. We're in 2021. Pandemic has wreaked havoc on all of us. More to come here on the Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski. We'll be right back after these messages. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? We are sorry, but due to a global shortage, we'll be unable to provide the rest of this radio program. Could you imagine if that would happen? That's kind of what's been happening in every single industry, and I know that many of you are facing this, maybe at your own businesses or maybe in your own life. Maybe it's just, trying to have fun or ordering things online on the internet for projects that you might need or for your local business. We've been running out of a lot of stuff. And we hear about global shortages. It's not just in microchips. In the beginning, it was lumber. There's all types of different product categories that are missing in action, that are stuck on boats somewhere out in the ocean, that are caught on the railway, that are still being made at the source. We've had all kinds of these issues, and I think everyone's been affected. And what we're seeing is the sort of it's a lagging indicator of what the shutdowns forced by governments around the world have actually done to ordinary people. And I remember at the time, you can find my articles all over the internet. Yaël Ossowski, Google me. I've written about the lockdowns and the impact that they've had on not only people's mental health, but the economies and individuals' well-being and livelihoods. Whenever they forced down many of these factories and plants, whether it be in China or different parts of Asia or even in the U.S., it meant that stuff was going to get stopgapped. Stuff was going to get behind. We were not going to be able to find, this correct normal time loop of products from when they're conceived of to when they're put to paper to when they are put into contract with the factory. The factory makes them and then they ship them over and we sell them to American consumers. We knew that there was going to be an impact, but it is getting really bad out there, folks. I know you probably have your own individual stories. I wish I could hear them all because everyone is being impacted by much of what's happening with supply chains. I mean, most people didn't even know what supply chains were many years ago. But here we are. We're in 2021. There's even a comment here. This is an article from Business Insider. Pete Buttigieg, he is the Secretary of Transportation, says supply chain disruptions won't really go away until we have, quote, put the pandemic in the rearview mirror. I mean, it's pretty rearview mirror to me, folks. Don't you think so? Plentiful vaccines, over 70% vaccinated. It seems like it's pretty much, we're over it, no? I don't know exactly what he's thinking about because it has... The thing is, it's kind of a pet peeve, right? Is whenever people say, jobs lost due to COVID, it's actually jobs lost or businesses lost because of the political or government reactions to COVID. COVID did not shut down your business. It was the politicians that shut down the business. You can blame the virus, no doubt. But the person who did it, the person who actually signed the order stating that your business would be closed, would be your governor, would be Roy Cooper in North Carolina, would be your local mayor if he had that jurisdiction. I think the supply chain problem is something to where many Democrats are not really going to get a good handle of this because this has a lot to do with international trade. It has a lot to do with, very dirty industries. It's not all clean cut, low carbon, emissions Norway. There's a lot of dirty stuff out there. There's a lot of very big polluting factories in China and Vietnam that eventually make products that come to our shores. Are they discussing that at the G20 with Joe Biden there in Scotland? I know they're talking about supply chains. I mean, it's gotten so bad. I know everyone has a story. The ones I heard are just about people buying cars because of the different, semiconductor shortages. National rental car shortage. We're still living through that. I mean, if you didn't need another example of how the rental car companies are just terrible, not being able to do this, not being able to keep up, the supply chain, that's something that really could have been avoidable. And it's not to say that there isn't one answer. The answer only was don't shut down businesses. Allow businesses to carry out whatever restrictions they can in terms of spacing or masking or different shifts, but don't shut it down completely. As we know, that's only going to have further reverberations and further impact down the future, and we're living through that. We're living through that if you go to the pump and you pay. I mean, I've been paying for gas in different countries, in Europe and Canada and the U.S. I mean, U.S. is still fairly affordable, but it ain't getting that way. It's getting up to levels, in many other countries where most of it is taxation. That's a whole other topic to think about one time, by the way. We can talk about getting rid of the gas taxes. But there's a lot of stuff happening at the ports. If you guys have seen, there's not enough people. There are not enough people who are working at the ports. They're trying to clear all of the cargo. They're trying to be sure that they can unload and load. And for many of these people, it's much cheaper to leave the stuff out on the boats floating in the ocean than it would be in some warehouse at the port awaiting inspection. This is the kind of stuff that, and I mentioned the IRS early on, since they are listening. The IRS, who wants to have $400 million in additional budget, who still have not completed 7 million tax returns for U.S. citizens. It's the same with this kind of area. We always hear that this government agency is failing because they don't have enough money here and there. Well, how many people are actually working? How many people are actually required to do what is necessary? Because there are a lot of people who are employed by the federal government. Many of them might provide value. I don't doubt that. However, we have to look at everywhere if we're going to cut, if we're going to be efficient. And for all of the issues that we're having with the supply chains and with customs and Coast Guards and being sure that people are paying, the duties on different products coming in from offshore. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we know the money is likely being wasted on. But this kind of stuff with, the shortages and the supply chain issues, this is going to continue on. I don't think this is done. It's kind of a slow domino. Once that first one goes down, it hits the next one and it keeps going. We don't even know what it would be. I mean, we say it's semiconductors, maybe it's aluminum, maybe it's steel, maybe it's lumber one day, but we don't know what exactly this could mean in a few months. What we do know is that there's a lot of people who are not working in those areas where we've had people working in the past, particularly at the ports. We have not been able to fill the demand, and that's happening with many different jobs. It's a strange era in our economy where jobs are plentiful, the wages are starting to rise, but so is an inflation. I don't know what the term would be now for the 2020s. 1970s, we had high unemployment and very high inflation. That was stagflation. What do you say when you have higher inflation and super low unemployment and actually a huge shortage in labor? I don't know what you call that, but I'm sure there's some economic term that's cropping up right now through the universities. We'll see if Pete Buttigieg is going to come out more on these issues. He is Secretary of Transportation, as we know, ran for president. Good for him, just as a mayor from small city, to be able to rise up and to be able to have this much prominence. I mean, not everybody can just go from being a small town Indiana mayor to eventually Secretary of Transportation, fixing potholes. And one thing you can do. This is interesting. I know you guys probably heard the story of Pete Buttigieg being on paternity leave there for a couple of months since August. No one had heard from him. It became a big conversation about parental leave and exactly what the policy should be, how much people should be getting paid. Should there be a government program? Should it be run by the states? Should it be private? La, 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 la. We heard all of that. There's a lot of great arguments there. We can get into that in another segment. But when it came to Buttigieg, he's the Secretary of Transportation. And if there are supply chain issues, There is actually one super easy thing he could do. He could take his pen and he could actually sign a waiver for all ships coming into the United States for the Jones Act. The Jones Act, or the Merchant Marine Act, essentially makes it illegal for any foreign flagged carrier ship to make stops between two U.S. ports. It sounds very complicated, but it basically means that Hawaii cannot buy its toilet paper from some other island that might be closer. It has to come from California. And that makes it complicated. It makes things expensive. And anyone who's ever been to Hawaii knows that it is more expensive. Anyone who's been to Puerto Rico, much the same. The Jones Act was created to try to protect the domestic shipbuilding industry, but it continues on, and it's actually raising cost. And it's not just for the island nations, it's for all of us as well. All the American population, when we think of ships that come in and out, you know, if they could actually stop between ports rather than just coming from, you know, who knows, Hong Kong to San Diego and then all the way back, if they could go from San Diego up to Seattle, up to Canada, come back down, all kinds of products, I mean, that would be amazing. It would be much better trade, much better facilitation of transportation. That's a whole argument for eradicating the Jones Act, but Pete Buttigieg could do that right away. I mean, if I were him, I would have set that on my email away responder while I was on paternity leave, which I happened to be on, actually, at the same time, oddly enough. Though in the private market that I work in, it's only 2 weeks, not 3 months. Sorry there, Mayor Pete. But there's a lot that he can do. You know, let's not forget, the greatest power that a politician might have, or a bureaucrat might have, is in doing nothing, or in making sure that the rules don't apply anymore, or that you get a waiver. There's a lot of virtue in that, folks. We don't necessarily need to have busybody politicians and busybody bureaucrats. They could also be signing waivers or saying that this law shouldn't apply anymore. That's a waste of time. Wouldn't that be a revolution? All right, guys, Big Talker Mornings. I'm Yaël Ossowski. Keep tuned in your dial. We'll be right back after this. Big Talker Mornings here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. I'm Yaël Ossowski, broadcasting to you across the Wilmington area on the nets. Over there on YouTube, we got some on Facebook. We got a live stream there on the website, on our mobile apps over there on the Big Talker. Hope you guys can keep tuning into the conversation. If you're not familiar with me, if you're tuning in a bit late here on your morning drive, or maybe you're already at the office, my day job is as deputy director of an organization called the Consumer Choice Center. So we're a consumer advocacy group. We're fighting for all things that relate to smart policies, all things related to harm reduction, to evidence-based policies, and ultimately everything to promote consumer choice. And many of the topics that I've mentioned kind of relate to that. We do host a radio show weekly on this station on Saturdays at 10 a.m. called Consumer Choice Radio, in which we delve into these topics a bit more. One of them that I wanted to discuss is one that I've been interested in for a long time, that I've written about, and that I know that some of you might have a little tiny bit of a curiosity about. And we're talking about cryptocurrencies. Maybe you know Bitcoin, maybe you know crypto as a whole, maybe you've heard about all these other altcoins, or as some people call them, coins. Maybe you've heard about that. What I would like to do is just provide a little bit of perspective and talk about some of the regulations, but also the innovations, because that's really what is important about all of this, is the innovations that are coming in the crypto sphere and what it means for banking, what it means for government as a whole, what it means for taxation, what it means for investment, what it really could mean for so many different parts of our lives. There actually is a lot that could change, and I think this is one of the greater times to be living, in that we're able to participate in this. And you don't necessarily need to be spending thousands of dollars. If any of you guys are interested in cryptocurrency, you guys can always hit me up. You know where to find me. Yael OSS over there on Twitter. You can find me basically Googling around. I'm the only Yaël Ossowski in the universe, thankfully. But if you're interested in this, I think it kind of reveals a new paradigm. And there are some North Carolina politicians who understand this. I would say number one is Patrick McHenry. So he's a representative from out there near Gastonia, just west of Charlotte, North Carolina. He's been big on Bitcoin for a while. We've seen him do interviews where he's mentioned it. He's put the Bitcoin white paper, which, by the way, has reached the pinnacle decade-year-long reign. It is now 10 years old, the Bitcoin white paper put together by Satoshi Nakamoto. Patrick McHenry has put this white paper on his website. He's used the Bitcoin hashtag in some of his stuff. He's talked about crypto, Bitcoin. So we know that at least locally in North Carolina, we do have some politicians who are keen to discuss these topics. But why is it important for you to know about these topics? Let's say you're Joe Sixpack, you own a business, you're on Military Cutoff Road in Wilmington, North Carolina. You get a lot of tourists who come in. You know, they buy some of your products. You'll have local customers who are regulars. You have the normal terminal with your Visa and everything else. What crypto does, it is allows you to take out the middlemen of all of this. You don't need Visa. You don't need the terminal. All you need is access to some kind of Bitcoin address. And when people come to your store, they can use their phone to easily send you money. And if they're on the Lightning network of Bitcoin, they can send it to you in seconds. And there will be no fees at all. Those of you who are small business owners and have to work a terminal know that if you have Visa or MasterCard, it's typically around 3% of every transaction, of every purchase goes right back to the card company. Not to mention any other fees by the terminals, not to mention taxation, but that's a whole other point. What Bitcoin allows you to do and what these cryptocurrencies allow you to do is to bypass that altogether. Because it's the protocol that is the money. I think that is the bigger idea that will take some time for a lot of people to understand, is that the protocol itself, a fixed supply of currency at 21 million units, which is what Bitcoins are capped at, means that there can never be any inflation, much like we have now in our American economy with fiat dollars. We know the impact of what's happening with inflation. It does touch on many different areas of society. But if you have cryptocurrencies and they have a set supply, meaning they cannot just be printed out of thin air, then that means that it is true, honest money. It cannot be manipulated. And if we know that how it actually works and is confirmed is by cryptographic ledgers, by very complex computer code that are verified by thousands of individual computer nodes, then we know that that is honest currency. And the ability for a shop owner on Military Cutoff Road in Wilmington, North Carolina, to sell his product to a beach hippie who came down from New Jersey and wants to buy a new trinket, and they're able to complete that transaction and Visa or MasterCard don't get a slice, I think that's pretty interesting. I think it's great. And you don't need a bank account either, by the way. All you need is a wallet address, which is free to create, very easy to put together. Get your private key saved, and you can move money around the world in seconds. It's kind of the future of how all of this will work. We're in the early stages. We're in the beta stages. We're in the innovation stage where people are learning more about it, and I think the learning curve is definitely a big one. But essentially all of our money is digital today, isn't it? How many of you use cash on a daily basis? There are different institutions where we do use cash. You know, there are some bars that are cash only, sometimes little bodegas or shops that are cash only, sometimes laundromats, cash only. There might be a few of these, but the vast majority of businesses, at least in the U.S. in 2021, accept cards, debit cards, credit cards, PayPass. You know, put your card on the thing and it beeps. We have all of this technology, and that's all working in the background, and that's definitely evolved. But imagine if we could do that in a crypto economy that's not based on the US dollar. That is what really we have to think about. It's less about the technology of how it's used and interacted with, and more about the core philosophical principles. If we go back to 1971, the US dollar was actually based on a portion of gold. From that moment on, when President Richard Nixon removed the gold standard completely, that meant that the dollar was based on trust alone. It was based on whatever the government said it would be and whatever it would fetch in the market when compared to all the other currencies. Now, thankfully, the U.S. dollar is strong because the economy is strong, because the military is strong, because culture is strong. But there could be a competitor to this, especially if we see these trillion-dollar, budgets and plans and bills that come out every single year. That means the value will go down. We already know that the value has gone down. I don't even know how many percents at this point since 1913. But I think if you look at the dollar, just look at inflation numbers in terms of currency. When you compare this in the digital currency realm, it doesn't even compute. And that means that if you're an older person, if you're going into retirement, that means your money that you've worked so hard when you put, that $1,000 into your retirement account 30 years ago, it's going to be worth the same or even more in the future. Well, we don't want it to be worth less, and that's what inflation does. Inflation permeates so many different parts of our lives. It cuts down on the quality of good products. It makes things less available. It makes things more expensive. It clutters up our time. There's great books that have been told about inflation that aren't just about the numbers and digits, but actually how they impact, your daily life and just your walk from your door to your car to work, how that can be impacted by inflation. And that's why the crypto revolution is an interesting one. Again, I realize it's a complicated topic for many. It's surely not the number one topic on talk radio, though I think it will be in the next few years. We're going to see a change because what Bitcoin represents is an alternative to government money. It's an alternative to a monopoly. And I think that's something that talk radio is very good at denouncing, are monopolies, where they exist in politics and business and anywhere else. And what we have right now with cryptocurrencies in the future that they could provide could actually be an entirely new avenue. Forget the metaverse. We know what this will be powered by, and it'll be powered by cryptocurrencies. It'll be powered by this economy. And we're getting many more innovations all around that. There's all types of great products, and if you've ever had a bad experience with a bank, you've ever had a bad experience with any kind of financial product service, just know that all of that can be much better in the crypto economy. There's so many interesting things that you can do on some of these platforms and sites and using these crypto tokens. There's loans that you can take out. There's all types of compounding interest things that you can invest in. All kinds of little devices of where you loan money out and people get a certain payment. There's all kinds of great stuff that's happening there. It's still evolving. There's still a lot of kinks. But still, the ability to do this and to do so without government permission, to be able to do so while the banks are closed on the weekends and on the holidays, I think is a huge advantage. And the more people who accept Bitcoin, more people who learn about Bitcoin, I think that is all the better. Again, if you are interested in this and want to follow up, I've got plenty of resources online. I've written about this topic a good amount. Just go ahead and Google my name or put that in the DuckDuckGo. You'll find with my name and Bitcoin. I've got another article coming out in the European Conservative magazine this week that will discuss just this and particularly the regulations on cryptocurrencies and why the elite are so anxious and so afraid of what the crypto economy brings. So I know that many of you should be interested in that. It's kind of a new field, but at least one that I believe really requires a lot of good thinking, a lot of good time, good debate, and good analysis. And there are going to be multiple takes because not everybody agrees on which cryptocurrencies are the best. Everyone has their own thoughts, but they're out there, and it's a free market, folks. That's what we love. Speaking of that, got to pay the bills here at The Big Talker. We'll be right back after these messages. Coming up, rounding out the hour and the end of our program. Big Talker Mornings here on 106.7 FM, broadcasting out of Wilmington, North Carolina, the beautiful southeastern part of our state, the old North State. Thank you for tuning in. We're in the final segment here of our program. We've been on the radio almost 3 hours now, going through the stories of the day, hoping to keep you informed, hoping to keep you engaged. Make sure you know exactly what to talk about at the water cooler. One thing that we're discussing is the local elections that are happening tomorrow here in the Wilmington area. This is a sort of off election year, as they like to call it, because we don't have any major offices, presidency, Senate, all these kind of things. But we do have very, very important city council races, mayoral races, not just in Wilmington, but over in Brunswick County as well. So be sure that you read through all of the different candidates, send in your ballot. If you're going to do it by mail, you might be a bit late, but if you want to go in person, you can do that tomorrow. A lot of different issues that are being discussed. And one of them is we talked about with city council candidate Jonathan Uscaguetti. We talked about crime. He talked specifically about police. He talked about what the role of the police should be and how much support they should be getting from the city of Wilmington, which is a very important topic. And we've seen that this is animating other mayoral elections in the South as well. Atlanta is facing this kind of debate as well, and it's impacting a lot of different things. It's been dominated by talks of crime. There have been, numerous reports of gunfire. There have been some very bad crime incidents that have happened. And, the political leaders have not necessarily had all of the answers. So I think that is something that really is a big deal throughout the South, and I think will continue to. I mean, it's more a problem of major cities. Major cities, apparently controlled by Democrats. I don't mean to be that guy, but that's a whole other point. But in Atlanta, we have the former mayor, Kasim Reed. He's popped his up again. And the president of the city council, Felicia Moore, they're sort of the top candidates, and they're the ones that are saying that they're going to combat crime. So they're talking about hiring, many more police officers, increasing traffic cameras, license plate readers, cameras in parks, all these different things. Morris talked about neighborhood watch programs and, police officer programs that reach out to those who are retired so that they can recruit new police officers. So it has a lot to do with emphasis on the police and what the future will be. Yeah, it's interesting. This carries on in many different cities. And Atlanta, you would assume this is the heart of defund the police, but absolutely not. We've seen by all the poll numbers, especially when we look at what's happened since 2000. I mean, murders in Atlanta up 13%, assaults up 58%, something like this. This is not a good time, particularly for law and order in many big American cities. And it is being discussed not just in Atlanta, but in Wilmington as well, and throughout New Hanover County and Brunswick County. So your vote matters, folks. And a lot of stuff is going to be impacted by what's going to happen on Election Day tomorrow. And it's not just going to be, because of what happens in the White House. There's a lot of local stuff here that really matters that could impact your life. Just look at everything that's happened with school board meetings, talks of critical race theory and what happens there. I mean, these are local elected officials. Your votes count for or against those people who make the decisions. Many of us have probably, gone on autopilot and not paid attention to what's been happening. But I think no longer. I think we're in a new civic state of alertness, of readiness, and people are very attuned to these issues, and they're not going to let it slide anymore. And we'll see what the numbers say. If we have a huge increase in the number of people who are voting, particularly for municipal elections here in southeastern North Carolina, that could be a great indication that, it's a good time for civil engagement. That could mean very good things for the political parties, or it could just mean very good things for various political groups, but it means the times are a-changing, and people are engaged once again. This is kind of a cycle, and I'm not even that old, and I've seen this cycle play out many different times. We had the George W. Bush cycle of the evangelicals who are all teed up about the Taliban and gay marriage back in 2004, who went out in droves, and it was the highest vote totals at the time. We had the drive of Obama and Hope Hope and Change, that brought out a lot of people. A lot of people were engaged. And there's all these just cycles of disengagement and engagement. Depends on the issue, depends on the day. But, to see particularly the issue of critical race theory, of crime, these things have woken up a lot of people. And when we say that, we just mean that they've made them alert that these are things that don't have to be the status quo and can change. And that citizens actually have a voice in changing it. And I think that's the most positive aspect of much of our civil society. This is one of the greatest parts about being an American, about having a constitution, about having competing jurisdictions, the different states, the different cities. And we have the right of self-government. And not every society can claim that. We've already talked about Chinese Communist Party. We know that Jonathan Uscaguetti is from Venezuela, and they certainly do not have that type of plurality. They surely do not have that type of diversity of thought and political leadership in that country. And that's one thing to be thankful for, whether it's election day or not, whether you're participating or not. And I think that's why we have this great American experiment and why it continues to grow. And yeah, we'll face some bad days, let me tell you. We'll face some bad days. We'll face a January 6th. We'll face insurrections. We'll face all types of tiring times, trying times, times that wear us down as a people. But overall, we have that might and that individual thrust. I think that is very different. You can travel all over the world, and I've met a lot of different people. But that American cleavage, that American spirit that's embedded in so many of its citizens and residents is just different. It's unique. You can't explain it. It's this knowledge of self-government and in self-ownership that just doesn't exist in many other countries. People don't think of they are part of a collective at first. They think of themselves as individuals that are participating in a society to help out their neighbors. But there's not this collective mentality. And I think you just compare that to so many other countries, you just cannot compete with the United States in that way. So let's be very thankful for that. I think that's a great virtue. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, actually. It turns out pretty well for both sides. And it's a great advantage. And you're not going to find that in many other societies and many other cultures. Now, I used a lot of different news sources for today's program. So we started off the morning kind of taking some articles from the Washington Post, some from the New York Times, some from the Port City News, some from the Charlotte Observer, the Raleigh News and Observer. Actually took a couple articles from Twitter, some great North Carolina themed stories on Twitter, some things on Reddit, and Facebook, or Meta. We talked about that earlier in the program. And I think that kind of diversity of opinion is something that's always needed. And, we need to hear it more. And that's why I believe you're listening to talk radio. This is just part of your tool in the arsenal of being better informed, better entertained, and better able to participate in society. And you are doing your duty as those who read the paper every single morning do theirs. And I think this is a vital service that we provide in our republic. It's a republic. I hear a lot about the democracy angle, but yeah, guys. So we're heading out towards the end of the hour. It's been an amazing show. Great to have so many of you listening. Great to have some guests. We had Mark Sanford, former South Carolina governor, was featured on the program. We had City Council member Jonathan Uscaguetti, who was also on. We've got many important municipal elections that are happening in the Wilmington and southeastern North Carolina region. So be sure to stay tuned to that. Do your research. Find out the people you want to vote for, because they are the ones that you can complain to. And if they don't listen, you can call into this program. You can call into this station, and we'll see what we can do, because that's what open and free media is all about, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? It's a great little morning whirlwind there through some of the stories of the day. Heard about, what Biden is doing overseas, and perhaps it's going to be carbon taxes, or it's going to be some type of climate change, accord, or some type of regulation that'll be passed in the House and Senate. That'll come our way very soon. We're just hearing about the beginning of it. We'll see how it impacts us. And a little bit about, what's happening with Elon Musk and global poverty. And we even dissected Let's Go Brandon. I mean, how often do you have a morning radio show that will cut into all of that? Not often, ladies and gentlemen. So again, for Monday, this is Yaël Ossowski. We're the 1st of November. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I will be here again tomorrow on the Big Talker radio dial, 106.7 FM. Chad Adams will be taking over for the rest of the week. He'll be in on Wednesday. So you'll be able to hear more great, insightful analysis from your favorite station here in southeastern North Carolina. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.